Hey there, my name is Cole Adams, and you are watching the best college basketball podcast out there that covers the entire sport of college basketball, brackets, bubbles, and bid stealers. Now, here are your hosts, Sam Fetterman and Jonathan Lidskin.
Season 6, episode 15 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. I am Sam Fetterman. That is Jonathan Lidskin. Jonathan, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, Sam, early morning pod for me in Central Time, but couldn't be doing better.
Joey Dwyer is here with us because we are previewing the Vanderbilt Commodores. Joey, welcome to Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. How are you this morning?
I'm good. Also an early morning in Central Time. You guys caught me at a good time. If you had caught me throughout the entire summer, I wouldn't be awake right now. But since Vandy fall football has started, I figured out that I actually need a normal sleep schedule, and here we are.
Yeah, going back to school in a couple weeks and having to wake up at a normal time is going to really screw me up.
Yeah, right. This screwed me. The first day of fall camp, it was like, gosh, I don't even know if I can focus on what's going on. I'm so done, guys. By the way, you guys are great for still having me after our debacle. I'll let the listener in. Sam DM'd me and said, "Hey, can you come on Thursday?" I said, "Yeah, here's my number." Sent him the wrong phone number, so they texted the link to some random number, and they read the message. So it's these guys have some patience. Again, this is a case for them to have the best college basketball podcast out there. Good for these guys, because I don't know if I would have had the same patience.
I'll tell you what, if this were some random team and not Vanderbilt, a team that Jonathan and I are both super high on for next year, we probably would have just said forget it.
Yeah, I mean,
we do want to talk about the Commodores, who are in my preseason top 25 in year 2 for Mark Byington. I was high on them last year. I was proven right. Made the NCAA tournament. Almost won a game in the NCAA tournament. I'm sure that still hurts the Vanderbilt fan. The way St. Mary's pulled that off, the comeback in the second half, where it just felt like Vanderbilt couldn't get anything going offensively and couldn't get a stop. But here we are, year 2 for Byington. Year 1 was a huge step in the right direction. Went from 9 wins to 20 wins, first NCAA tournament appearance since 2017, highest KenPom rating since 2017. And year 2, they're going to build off of that. What's the vibe around Nashville right now, Joey?
Honestly, it's weirdly quiet just because they had so much roster turnover. I really don't think people know what they have. And also, I don't think Byington knows what he has necessarily. I think they know they have better size. They know they have better depth, and they're certainly a better shooting team. But, I mean, they lose Jason Edwards, who in some ways I think they're okay with losing. You look at last year's recruiting class, and last year they had – sorry, Sam, what did you say?
That's a lot of shots.
Yeah, right. And I think a lot of what they lost last year was guys that didn't necessarily fit with what they wanted to do. They had to really throw together a recruiting class and a team pretty quickly. And I don't think in a normal offseason, Edwards and Hogard are guys that they necessarily would have targeted or at least invested as heavily in or given as big of roles to. I think this summer you really saw them be able to recruit to the scheme. Obviously, their emphasis were getting bigger and shooting it better, but yeah, I think this team is more of a Mark Byington team than it was in the past, and I don't know that they have an Edwards or a guy that they're going to be able to lean on in that way. But I think as a whole, you look at it and you think that they're probably better.
Let's start with the most underrated player in college basketball, Devin McLaughlin. Transferred from Boston College, was solid at Boston College, really took a step up last year in my eyes. Usage went up, offensive rating went up, rebounding numbers went up, turnover rate went slightly down, block rate went up, steal rate went up. Basically everything went up for Devin McLaughlin aside from 3-point percentage. He was number 1 on the team by a landslide in on-off. Vanderbilt was 22.7 points per possession, points per 100 possessions. If it was points per single possession, that would be pretty crazy, Jonathan. Mm-hmm. But Devin McLaughlin, the most underrated player in college basketball. Jonathan, am I right for saying that? And I've been saying it all offseason.
Yeah, his per-minute stuff is just out of this world good. I mean, there's a lot of things that he does well, and it translates into Vandy being much better when he is on the floor, Sam. I think that one, he's not only the only underrated player on this team. I think Vandy's filled with players who are really underrated nationally, and I'm sure we'll talk about a couple more of these in a sec. But keeping him around, Sam, when you lose a player like Jason Edwards, it just shows how advanced this Vandy staff is, like how forward thinking they are. Like they could have probably paid up to keep Jason Edwards, who, he was your leading scorer. He was the guy that you turned
And he's
to.
going to be the best player on Providence this year.
Yeah, he was the guy that you turned to. I mean, his usage rate was really, really high, and he was pretty efficient. But I think Vandy understands that, like, they can to steal the money ball line,
They can recreate the
like, yeah, like they don't need to have a Jason Edwards, and it's more important.
Hey, I don't think his on base percentage was 477. I actually was just watching Moneyball last night.
Yeah. But yeah, it's more important to keep a guy like McLaughlin who does more than just score.
For me, when I look at McLaughlin, and Joey, you know exactly how I feel about McLaughlin. I just think that he's the exact type of guy that is the essence of what Mark Byington wants. And you see that with the versatility that he brought in the transfer portal this year, A.K.O. Okereke, Tyler Harris, a bunch of guys that kind of do not the exact same things, but similar things. Okereke, I'm especially excited to see those lineups with him. But McLaughlin as this type of switchable 4-5 combo that can handle the ball from the elbow, but can also step out, take an outside shot, and shoot 70% at the rim at that size with that strength. Do you think, Joey, do you think there's upside for Devin McLaughlin to be one of the best 3 or 4 players in the SEC next year?
I don't know that I'm willing to put him that high just because I think there are guys who are pretty significantly more talented. And also, I don't know that he's ever going to be a guy that's necessarily your number one scorer. But also, here's a couple things that I think are huge this offseason. One, first of all, like you guys had talked about, Jonathan especially, I talked to Mark Byington this summer. He had talked about how when Devin McLaughlin was on the floor for them, they were easily a top 25 team last year in terms of the metrics that he looked at. And when he was off the floor, they were nowhere near a top 25 team. And maybe that was his way of getting back at Jalen Carey for some of the stuff that he said a little bit. But I also think it's some pretty high praise of Devin McLaughlin. And Byington does think he'll be one of the best players in the league, particularly because they're going to move him to the 4 this year. If you saw him play in the 5 last year, I thought he was significantly overmatched in most of the games they played. And obviously it helped him at times because he had guys who couldn't move their feet, had to guard him out on the perimeter. He could get some stuff off the closeout. But also, I think this is his more natural position. I think it really opens up their offense. Jalen Washington, obviously going to play the 5, and he can really step out and shoot it. I don't think that was really showcased enough at North Carolina. They kind of, from what Tyler Nickel told me, they wanted Jalen Washington to be Armando Bacot, and he really never was that. So
yeah, no crap.
Yeah, right.
He was not close.
Yeah, if you watch them in the summer, Jalen Washington is putting it on the floor. He's pulling up for his own shot, and that's probably not going to happen once they're not playing pickup games. But his workouts are all like guard-oriented workouts, which I think is interesting, and that helps McLaughlin too because if he wants to play on the perimeter, McLaughlin can go inside a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know how much I buy the Jalen Washington putting it on the floor, but I think at the very least he's going to be a pick and pop guy that is going to space the floor for them, and that opens up some things for McLaughlin as well.
Yeah, because for me, the whole McLaughlin, the Jalen Washington thing is, all right, you have an actual center, not even a guy that's a stretch 5. Like my opinion on Jalen Washington, notwithstanding, I think he was pretty bad at North Carolina. I think that as a guy who doesn't have to be the only rim protection option, he can be kind of a roamer. I think he's agile for his size. Like when you think of Washington, you said they tried to make him like Bacot. He's the opposite of Bacot. Bacot was a very drop coverage oriented guy. I think Washington can do a little bit more, coming out a little higher on those ball screens. And I think that that's the type of defense that Mark Byington wants to play. He wants to be fluid. He doesn't want to be in one shape the whole time. It's very total football, where you can have 5 guys that are like Byington's one of the most positionless coaches in college basketball, in my opinion. And you look at that when you see the projected starting lineup that has 3, 6, 7 guys in it that can all be 3s and 4s, and one of them's going to end up playing the 2, depending on what they do with Tanner and Miles and Collins. But I think that kind of a 4th, 6th, 7 guy off the bench as well. That's going to play big minutes depending on who doesn't get the start. But for me, I'm not like a Jalen Washington super fan. I am a concept fan of what Jalen Washington is. And I think Jonathan's the same way. So I want to talk also about another super underrated piece that's kind of in a similar light to McLaughlin, but a little better on the ball and probably a little worse defensively. That would be A.K. Okereke, a guy I saw a lot at Cornell. One of my favorite names in college basketball, one of my favorite stories in college basketball, and also one of my favorite players in college basketball. You kind of get the big three. Saying A.K. Okereke has been one of the most fun things to do for me over the last 2 years of watching college basketball. Listening to A.K. Okereke's story, guy started off as a team manager in the Ivy League. I also 6'7", 240 manager. Okay,
Right.
pretty good practice player.
Something tells me there was a reason they took him as a manager.
Yeah, Clovis, California, was rivals in high school with none other than Vance Wahlberg, the head coach at Fresno State. So that's an interesting story. But Okereke was second in the Ivy League in assist rate last year. He was 5th in block rate, 5th in steal rate, 2nd in drawing fouls, 11th in free throw percentage, 1st in 2-point percentage, 1st in offensive rating. That comes with an uptick in usage rate from 19% to 23%. Maybe the most versatile player in the Northeast last year. Not exactly the greatest defender, even though the numbers are great. I think he's a lot better offensively than he is defensively. But I think, great defender in the Ivy League. I don't know if the defense will be quite as good in the SEC, but I think that he's versatile enough that he can guard multiple positions and fit really well with what Byington wants to do. And as just a guy that can catch the ball really anywhere on the floor, that's my favorite. That was one of my favorite things about Cornell. The amount of different places that he was able to catch the ball on the floor and make an impact. Elbow, top of the key, down low. He's a 3-level triple threat.
Mm-hmm. Sam, I think the thing the Vandy staff is excited about that people haven't really noticed about him is his Barkley ability. Like that, they will light up talking about A.K. Okereke getting to his Barkley. Like that's a huge deal for them, and I think generally he's a great fit with what they want to do. Like you mentioned the versatility, he can really pass it, and I think Frankie Collins is going to be the primary initiator for them, but Byington has always had multiple initiators on the floor. And he's also a guy who, one, can be the ball handler in a ball screen, and 2, can set the ball screen because he's big enough. And Byington has really challenged him to become a better jump shooter this summer. I think that's the next step for his game and becoming a real SEC contributor. But they expect him to play a lot of minutes, and they expect him to do a lot of different things for them. I almost think that his skill set is more practical for them than Chris Magnon's was. And you look at Chris Magnon, he's on a 2-way deal.
When the hell did it become Magnon? I covered him for multiple years at Cornell.
Yeah.
He was always Chris Mannon.
Yeah. So
I remember seeing a tweet that was great. It was like Chris Mannon added the tilde to his name just so NBA scouts would think he's Spanish. And
yeah, so that's great. And
then I saw in the NBA, it's back to being Mannon.
It shouldn't be. I don't know so he just let it slide at Cornell apparently, and they did you know how on the website they'll have the pronunciation. They asked him, and he said Magnon, and they met like as a communication staff, and they were like, let's ask him again, and he said the same thing. He was like, oh, everybody's got it wrong. I don't get why people don't just correct people if you're.
This has happened before. This is not the first time this has happened.
Bijan Robinson did it this week. How do you say his name? Bijan?
I didn't see that, but Osborne Shema played 3 seasons at Iona. Before on the Buffalo trip at the airport, he has to say his name because he's international and he has to present his passport. He has to say his name to the gate agent and the TSA agent. He says Osborne Shema, and the SID is right next to him. And the SID's told me this story. He's like, "Wait, what's your name?" Because it's been Osborne Shema for 3 years.
That's incredible.
Also, very unique player. But back to AK, because we're dragging and I have a flight to catch.
Oh, this guy's got big business to tend to.
Yeah. On Okereke, Sam, you guys kind of covered it. I think this is probably one of the better decisions from a transfer this year, going from a very friendly floor spacing system at Cornell to now what Vandy does. I think his game should translate pretty well too, especially just because he's 6'7", 240. Like the SEC has more guys than that than the Ivy League, obviously. But if you're talking about like an SEC ready body as a transfer, I think he's definitely fits that build.
Yeah, I also think. Sorry, Sam. Before you go, I think it's a reflection on him too. He is so dedicated to academics and like things along those lines. It's not often you see decisions like that. His final two were Vandy and Cal, and then I think he also considered Stanford out of the portal. So that tells you about the kind of guy AK is.
Yeah, and that's another thing about Vandy. Those are the schools that you're competing with for players. Like, obviously, Duke is like on that level as an institution. Like, if you just ask random people on the street who are the peer schools for Vanderbilt, like Duke is one of the schools that'll come up. But obviously, Duke is not competing for the same basketball talent as Stanford and Cal and Vandy. But those are the types of schools you're competing with, and you just have to be able to beat those schools out for guys like this a lot because. And it's kind of making the other schools look bad when Vandy is winning a lot of these battles because of how good they're looking right now. And you look at those rosters at Cal and Stanford, and they're not great. But man, because a lot of these guys at Vandy, I've noticed, have had Cal or Stanford on their lists, and Virginia's kind of the same way but they're kind of also operating in a different league. Northwestern does a good job with this too.
Yeah.
But Vanderbilt has done an excellent job also of getting players that maybe aren't considering Cal and Stanford and finding the right ones of those to mix in. But then I want to talk about one of my favorite players in the country in Tyler Tanner as this team's point guard alongside Frankie Collins. What do you think the dynamic is going to be between those two?
It's interesting to me. I was talking to somebody over there yesterday, and I was like, is there a world where they start next to each other? And he said, probably not, but I could see Tanner starting in place of Frankie in certain matchups. They think Tanner is the truth. They think he's a lot better than he was last year, particularly because he changed his shot. And I think he changed it with 4 or 5 games to go in the regular season and was like 3 for 7 after the change. The mechanics are a lot more fluid. He gets it off faster. I think that's a big key for him. Obviously, he didn't shoot it very well last year, and everybody knew that he was better than that. So maybe this is what he needed there, but you watch his high school tape, and he's really getting it off the bounce. Really didn't see a ton of that this year or last year as a freshman. I would think his offensive role is much more expansive this year, and he's not only going to be a distributor. I think with the way their offense works, he's going to have a lot of room to be able to go score it and get it off the bounce, and especially demonstrate what he can do around the rim, because I think that's a really special part of his game that you didn't see a whole lot. Everyone knows he can defend. Everyone knows he's disruptive and he's composed, doesn't turn it over a lot. But I think the scoring is really going to come in this year.
69% at the rim last year for Tyler Tanner. My favorite thing about Collins and Tanner is if you play them together, you are getting you're going to win more possessions. You're going to get so many steals with those two guys. Tanner was 15th in the country in steal rate last year. What was Collins? Did he qualify?
I don't know that he played like 9 games.
Yeah, probably didn't qualify. But 3.6 steal rate last year. Career steal rate has to be over 3. Was number 1 in the Pac-12 in the final year of the Pac-12 at Arizona State. Now, I'm a little bit of a Frankie Collins skeptic because I don't think he's very good offensively. I think he's it's kind of all been downhill offensively since that NCAA tournament game against Colorado State when he was a freshman. But talented playmaker, good ball handler. When he's not turning it over and he's not taking too many shots, he's actually really dynamic. As long as he keeps himself in the black and not go in the red in terms of the turnover margin. I think he should be fine because I don't think he's going to have to handle the ball at all times. And maybe he's not the greatest off-ball player. I'm a little bit unsure what that looks like, but I think that this team has a bunch of guys that can handle the ball in different spots. Tanner, obviously. Harris is a unique player that I want to get into briefly. Nickel does things. Okereke, McLaughlin, obviously. But I want to talk Harris and Nickel quickly, and as well as Duke Miles. Because Harris and Nickel are probably going to be 2s and 3s for this team. What do we think about those guys in that spot?
I'll start here. It's so funny. We're 21 minutes into this pod, and we haven't mentioned the guy that I think is going to be the leading scorer for this team in Tyler Nickel. Like, just a great shooter. Obviously, another guy that's coming from like the ACC. Vandy plucked him from, I think it was Virginia Tech right after UNC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He had a good year at Virginia Tech.
He had a great year last year. I think his usage will go up with Edwards gone. His efficiency numbers were off the charts. Doesn't turn it over. Defense obviously leaves a little to be desired, but I just think an overall excellent offensive player.
Yeah, just straight up one of the best shooters in college basketball.
Yeah, and that's what they want him to do. I don't think you're going to see a ton different from him. He told me he wants to create his own shot more, but that seems like an off-season thing to me. Yeah, I think that's more of an off-season thing than when you're an SEC player seeing Tyler Nickel create his own shot. Who is going to have to do it is Tyler Harris. Mark Byington told me that's what they've been working with him on all offseason. He's going to be a 2-guard for a lot of the season. And to me, in some ways, that seems a little unnecessary. That he had told me he was going to play the 2 before they got Duke Miles. And the early reports on Duke Miles are excellent. Like, they think he was confined by the Oklahoma system being kind of a 3-and-D guy, and they think he can really create his own shot. That's been a real development over the summer, and who knows how much that actually comes into play. But the High Point tape definitely would indicate that there's some possibility there. I also think Mike James, somebody we haven't talked about, I think he's going to be a real factor for them. They seem to think this is his best college season coming up here. I think he was kind of constrained by the situations he's been in the past, but they think in this system he can be really dynamic, and I really don't see why not. There's been a couple practices that they've had, from what I've heard, where he was just far and away the best player on the court at certain times, and I don't doubt that can happen during the season as well. But Tyler Harris, I think, is going to really have to grow into that, maybe not handling role, but shot creation role. And I'm a little skeptical right now that that's going to be able to be the case. Byington said he's got to get his shot off faster than he's getting it off right now. And that's really been what they've honed in on this summer. Obviously a dynamic shooter, a dynamic shot maker, but I think it's different when you're tasked with being one of the primary shot creators on an SEC team. I almost think that Mike James and Duke Miles are more suited to do that than Tyler Harris is right now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out like how many guys in high major basketball have made more threes over the last 2 seasons than Tyler Nickel, because he's made 140, and he's done it at a 40% clip.
That's unbelievable.
Walter Clayton made a lot more than that. He made 210, which is nuts. But yeah, he's got to be very high on that list. And Tyler Harris was a guy that I was really high on as in his first couple weeks at Portland as a freshman. Thought he had a solid year at Washington, no doubt. The shot really came along as at a really high level. Good rebounder, physical guy. Very fascinated to see what he looks like for this team. But yeah, Miles was like my guy last year. That was Jonathan remembers this. I was enamored with Duke Miles, and I will buy in a little bit to the, hey, maybe Oklahoma didn't give him the license to do everything that he's capable of doing, given what I thought of him at High Point as one of the best guards in the country, and how well I thought he was going to play at Oklahoma. Because I think the thing with Oklahoma was they committed so heavily to, hey, Jeremiah Fears is our point guard, and it worked. It got them to the NCAA tournament, and they kind of had Miles, Goodine, Elvis in there as guys that were a lot more of just shooters for them, and fine, like it worked. Again, they got to the NCAA tournament for the first time under Porter Moser. I do think there's a little bit more that Duke Miles can do. I think the question is how much more, and is he the best defensive fit for this team? We'll see. I think there's a chance Miles can be really good. I also think that there's a reason why Duke Miles ended up committing to 3 or 4 different schools this offseason. Maybe that's a little bit of a cause for concern. We'll have to see. But I like what Miles was at High Point, and I think there's a chance he can be a really effective player here. Are there any of the freshmen that you think will make an impact in year one, Joey?
I don't really think so. Last summer, all you heard about was Tyler Tanner and how he was going to make an impact, and I don't really even know that the minutes are there if anyone were to emerge. Jaden Leverett, I think, could maybe be like their third or fourth big man, but even then, like Washington's going to play a lot, Nicholson's going to play a lot, and then if both of them are in foul trouble, I just think McLaughlin slides in at the 5. Jalen Dean Vines is probably their most athletic player. Still, I don't think that he's ready to eclipse Mike James or Duke Miles or anyone along those lines. I think they brought in vets for a reason. And then Chandler Bing, I think they brought in with the intention that he was going to develop and be around for a few years. So, yeah, I don't think any of those guys are going to see significant time. If I had to guess, Leverett would probably play the most. But honestly, I wouldn't be stunned if all 3 of them were to redshirt.
Jonathan, anything else to add before we go?
I think we got to most of what we wanted to get to. I mean, this was one of our longer episodes. I will say that I think one of the things that makes this team so special in our eyes overall is not the individual talent. It's that there are going to be a lot of lineups where they have 5 guys on the floor that can cover a lot of different things in the game of basketball, and also 5 guys that are a threat offensively. Not a lot of teams have 5 guys that complement each other as well as Vanderbilt will at all times.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Just super high on this team. Joey, is you kind of mentioned that that's a little quiet right now, but is the feeling? Do you think the feeling ends up being that this team is going to take a step forward, like for the fan base? Do you think people are going to settle on this team being really, really good coming into the season?
I could see it that way. I think generally what I've sensed is people think the floor is lower because they don't have a Jason Edwards. And I guess I get that, but also Jason Edwards shot him out of a few games. So I think in some ways that isn't a huge thing. The things I think people are worried about is, one, do they have enough shot creation? If Duke Miles truly has taken a step forward that way, I think that helps. Mike James, obviously, I think has a chance to be one of their better shot creators as well. And then I don't know that they have a great low post guy, but also in that offense, I don't know that you need it. A lot of their offense, when it's truly the offense that Mark Byington has, is closeout oriented, where Frankie Collins can get downhill and they can kind of just go from there. They don't need Jason Edwards to go do his thing, or they don't need Jalen Carey to put his back to the basket. But yeah, I think there is a world where they definitely could be better. And I think this is a team that has a chance to make a little bit of a deeper run because they are deeper. And also, again, like they're not reliant on one guy. That's a blessing and a curse, as you guys know. But ultimately, I do think it settles in, especially if they lose a few football games early, and that really changes the narrative around this basketball team. Like, nobody's worried about basketball right now, which is a weird feeling around Vanderbilt because I think everyone around week 2 or week 3 is focused on basketball. But yeah,
I would think they're usually focused on baseball by that point.
Yeah, I mean, you should have seen the stacks last year. Football was 2-10, and everyone thought that team would be unbelievable. And I was like, guys, that team is not that good. And then they lose to Presbyterian, and everybody's worried about baseball in November. So I don't know. I don't think it'll be that way this year, but there's always a chance for that in the Vanderbilt fan base.
Shout out World Series champion David Price. Jonathan, you want to take us home?
If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he's working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about I don't know, Sam Fetterman catching a flight soon, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about the latest happenings with Caleb Grill, you came to the right place. This has been Season 6, Episode 28 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers, our Tip-Off Talk Vanderbilt episode. This has been a great